Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and today we're going to look at Vegas betting odds, lines for the passing attacks around the NFL, comparing to the average ADP, overall ADP here on the screen. I'll go a little bit more into this. Just a heads up, Tuesdays, Thursday evenings, you can come join us for some practice fantasy football mock drafts. So those are at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please come and join us for those. Without further ado, though, let's just dive right into this video. I definitely have already adjusted some of my quarterback rankings with this information. I think it's really good, helpful information, and as we know, if there's anybody who knows best, it is probably Vegas. Of course, the numbers are not holistically perfect because the betting public also has an impact on them, but they still do a nice job giving us a good idea of ultimately here, how are we doing in terms of ADP? Are we overdrafting some guys? Are we underdrafting some guys? So that's what I will be pointing out to you based on some of the information. So, for instance, this column here is going to be your receiving yards, the odds for all players that have betting odds of 1,250 plus receiving yards. For this next column, F, they're receiving touchdowns, the odds of 10 plus touchdowns. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to find reception total odds, so there is a little bit missing there. Obviously, depending on your format, you get a general idea, and I'll try to point out in some instances players where maybe we should keep that in mind, of course. But nonetheless, when it comes down to it, I treated in terms of just my little descriptors of kind of what Vegas is telling us about these players. I treated the receiving yards as looking at like a floor and the ceiling being the touchdowns for them. And then I just did a 7-point scale based on the intensity of the colors here of the betting odds in comparison to others. 7, a high number, obviously being good, and all the way down to 1. So 4 being neutral. So anything in white is, received a 4. You already know that then. And these are the total points. So I have them in some tiers. So let's just start looking at this to start off. Yeah, Vegas is in agreement that Jamar Chase is the clear-cut number 1 fantasy prospect to be getting. No question there. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb just behind that. What I should point out too is that the average ADP is the secondary sorting column. So after the total points, they're in order of their average ADP in each column. And that is how we're going to help to determine which players might be drafted a little too high, which ones might be some values. So as you can see in this next grouping of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr. Here, I'm going to do this. So that way, now I can control Brian Thomas Jr., Drake London, A.J. Brown, and Tyreek Hill. Notice Puka Nacua not being in that category. So these lightly colored ones like Tyreek Hill, that's going to be my potential values. That's literally what I just called him, as a potential value here. Going, the latest out of this group received the same total points here as the entire group. And I think that makes enough sense. There's obviously... You know who Tyreek Hill is, his past production, the possibility, I should say, of that occurring again beyond his ADP. So not too shocked, but that is nice to see that Vegas backs that up in terms of maybe I'm going to feel a little bit more comfortable grabbing him now in drafts where he's going for sure. And then that's going to bring us on to this next grouping, Puka Nacua at the top of it. And as you can see, his overall ADP, average ADP, much, much higher, or at least higher, to significantly higher than the others in this same group. Higher than a lot of these other guys in the group above it. And that brings us to, the potential problem with Puka Nacua. And one of the things that I wonder may or may not impact his draft stock, as well as Devontae Adams, which doesn't appear to have, from what I can tell with these numbers and where they're at, is the current injury status of Matthew Stafford and the concerns with his back. So I'm sure that will help to push these two back, but it seems like this is expecting Matt Stafford to be healthy week 1, and even then, the big question, the concern here is the upside, the ceiling, due to a lesser expectation of a high amount of touchdowns for Puka compared to pretty much everybody, the top 24-ish other prospects. It's the same as some others down here in the next category or in the next tier. So that makes sense to me, obviously, in terms of like full PPR. Puka also has gotten a lot of receptions in the past, but the addition of Davante Adams will quite potentially reduce that by some amount as well. So I had actually, prior to doing this, pushed Puka Nacua back down in my rankings a little bit, in part because of the Matt Stafford news, and just generally speaking, it felt like I definitely had him as high as he should go. So now I'm back a little bit further on him. And Vegas is not opposed to that. Other guys in this tier, you can see Ladd McConkey, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. I would say basically, anybody in white generally does not stick out as being over or under drafted in here. So T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, Davante Adams. But Terry McLaurin tends to be maybe a little bit of a value. Marvin Harrison Jr., I guess Vegas is in line with, so that's somebody, along with several others who maybe I will push up a little bit in my rankings that I'm a little bit more concerned about the potential there. I can still be concerned about him, but maybe I need to be just a little more aggressive with some guys in my rankings. Mike Evans, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton. So I didn't need to highlight a few of these guys, but there's something else that we're also seeing in these numbers with the lower receiving yards total odds. Davante Adams, Mike Evans, Cortland Sutton all have some consistency concerns, and that once again really vibes with exactly, I think, how a lot of us might view these guys. There is some concern about those specific guys and the target numbers game in and game out. This next tier starts off with Jameson Williams, followed by George Pickens, Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley. So, gonna quick point out, Chris Godwin, the news on him lately has not been great. I was surprised to see the betting odds where they're at on him. I do wonder if that will be something that will change or not, but as of, I assume, an expectation of a healthier Chris Godwin, we were drafting him roughly correctly, it would appear. But now, when we look at Jameson Williams, he's the one who stands out, as you can see, up to, 13 to nearly 20 different spots in ADP compared to these other guys in this same tier. And when you look at this, you just see maybe a little bit of a limited floor and also an upside compared to where he's being drafted quite specifically. Of course, these are still quite good betting odds when you compare them as you go down. But when you compare them to others that you are drafting ahead of them in some instances and whatnot, just gently going maybe a little bit too high, and this does jive with my rankings for him. I have been lower on him than the public as of this point in the off season, so I always like to see those things verified. Somebody who maybe we're not too concerned about enough here at the top of this next tier, Garrett Wilson. God, that is so annoying. I'm sorry about that. I copied and pasted the ADPs from Fantasy Pro, so that's why, even though those aren't links, they're still links. I can't click on them like a link, but that still shows up. So anyways, right here, this tier of guys, starting off with Garrett Wilson, Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers, Chris Olave, Cooper Kupp, Brandon Ayuk. We're starting to get right into this kind of just above average, average to below average. So there's a lot of guys here that maybe we are drafting incorrectly in one direction or another. And once again, that starts off with one of the maybe two guys here that I have a red flag on, would be Garrett Wilson, because we are drafting him ahead of even guys up here 2 tiers above, fairly significantly, almost 20 spots higher than Cortland Sutton there. And the betting odds aren't really supporting that. They're telling us that, yeah, the floor is still fine. It's not fantastic, though. Vegas, very clearly, we're going to look at the quarterbacks as well, is not expecting this offense to be some prolific passing offense. Of course, he's still going to get a good share of that, but Vegas isn't expecting that to be anything that's going to reach up to the amount of yardage totals, at least, as some of these other guys. So, yes, target totals and stuff will be probably better than some of these guys. So, half PPR, full PPR, keep that in mind as we look at this. But nonetheless, good floor, average ceiling, perfectly average ceiling, not expecting a lot of touchdowns, but expecting some. Nonetheless, where you're drafting him might be a little bit too high, according to Vegas. And I'm trying to stick with Vegas. I'm obviously throwing out some of my opinions, some things that I've gotten right or some things that I've gotten wrong, and I'll be moving the guys up. Hey, another one I think I got right, Calvin Ridley there for sure. And things that we've gotten right as a community, once again, typically going to be in the white there. Somebody who I'm a little bit higher on, Chris Olave, but I don't, I'm able to take him roughly at his ADP just a little bit before because people are there's going to be some people in your league who are willing to draft him, and there's going to be some people who just aren't touching him. So that's where his ADP is pretty volatile depending on the league and the specific players in your league that are drafting. Nonetheless, other guys here who are yellow flags, Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers, and I think this makes sense for Devonta Smith. He's got average consistency. It's a lower passing offense. He's not the primary target in it. And then you do have that touchdown upside with him to some extent, just roughly above average upside, though, in terms of the touchdown upside. And then Zay Flowers, for different reasons, in the same boat, him a little bit more consistent target-wise, but the touchdowns on that offense hasn't been a big touchdown getter historically, so still young in his career and everything, but average ceiling according to Vegas. And then you get down to some of the guys who maybe we could be drafting higher, and I'm gonna say Cooper Kupp's a guy who I do have higher in my rankings than where he's getting drafted. That doesn't mean I always want him on all of my teams, but there is a floor here with Cooper Kupp and some sort of touchdown upside given the other weapons on this Seattle offense, as long as he can stay healthy, of course, and that's one thing that, you get concerned about during drafts. But nonetheless, he goes significantly behind all of these other guys, and Vegas is saying he's not too different. So him and Brandon Ayuk, both consistent with average ceilings. Going to bring us on to this next tier here, the average crew, getting 8 points, being right in the average grouping there. So, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Jordan Addison, guys who I have typically been lower on than ADP. Waddle I'm probably right in on, and Waddle is a very soft fade, I guess, if you want to call these fades, whatever. But yellow flag here on Waddle as well. And these are guys who you can see, they all have varying different profiles here. For Jalen Waddle, I'd say he's a below average ceiling guy, but should have some sort of floor. For Jerry Jeudy, looking at a nicer floor there. I mean, the betting odds on the yardage totals are pretty decent. Now, of course, the quarterback situation has to concern you, but the worst offenses in the NFL still put up yards to some extent. So he has a below average ceiling, but a higher floor. So this is one where, do you draft Jerry Jeudy or Jalen Waddle? Vegas seems to suggest Jerry Jeudy ahead of Jalen Waddle, but definitely tends to agree with them being close by at least. And then Jordan Addison, once again, I mean, this makes sense with the profile for Jordan Addison being the number 2 in Minnesota with the rookie quarterback and an offense that's probably going to want to establish that run more so than they did last year even. So the yardage totals are not the best, a little bit inconsistent, but he does have a decent, touchdown expectation, touchdown odds there. So that is good. They're expecting that offense to still be competent under J.J. McCarthy. And then other guys who have, I was talking about Brandon Ayuk like that's Juwan Jennings, but Brandon Ayuk, I don't get these odds. My bad. maybe I'll cut that portion out coming back to talk about Brandon Ayuk here after I just talked about cut before. For Brandon Ayuk, the injury, I'm surprised by the betting odds once again here. So where I got these numbers from doesn't seem to be taking those into account as of the time of me taking the numbers. So keep that in mind as well. But that brings us back down here to Stephon Diggs, Jauan Jennings, Jakobi Meyers. So Diggs, Jakobi Meyers, two guys who maybe I need to push up in my rankings a little bit. I did move Diggs up a little bit recently, so we'll see. But nonetheless, just kind of perfectly average guys. I mean, look at these both. Just pure white in terms of the betting odds for the yards and the touchdowns there. So those are some guys maybe you can feel very confident getting them at ADP. I would say Jauan Jennings, you should feel very confident. But in the case of Jauan Jennings, all right, quick reset. I don't know exactly where I left off. Talking about Jauan Jennings again, he did get injured, I believe, in practice. So the wide receiver woes continue in San Francisco. That was either this morning or yesterday as of recording this. So for Jauan Jennings, there is some current concern there about the injury status for him. So we'll see if maybe we don't need to raise him up in via ADP at least. But Diggs, Jakobi Meyers, guys who, yeah, looking good. That's bring us on to this next tier here. Now we're looking at kind of the below average group. And right off the top, you got Tyrone McMillan, Travis Hunter, a couple of guys who I have. Travis Hunter, I'm pretty much right in on just because there's that upside, but Tyrone McMillan and Travis Hunter also kind of off my board, despite, you know, where I have them ranked. Just currently too concerned about that. Usage-wise, a little bit less so about that. I actually kind of confident in that, but if they're truly going to use him on defense a significant amount, I don't expect him to stay healthy, and a rookie who doesn't stay healthy, it's probably not going to come together for you. But Tyrone McMillan, another guy who maybe people are drafting a little too high. Rome Odunze, very softly, maybe going a little bit too high here when you compare him to others in the same group. Khalil Shakir, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, even the other guys obviously lower that we're going to call values. That is so annoying every time I go over that. But for all three of these, Tyrone McMillan, Travis Hunter, Rome Odunze, the profile is pretty similar here, inconsistent with an average ceiling, and out of the three of them, Rome Odunze actually should be the one that we're drafting the highest, according to Vegas. Reception totals, full PPR, maybe I still take, I definitely take Tyrone McMillan above him still, Travis Hunter, that starts to get a little bit closer there. And half PPR, I'm good with Rome Odunze, probably. I don't know. I struggle with that Chicago offense and those Chicago weapons. But Shakir, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, generally Vegas is saying fine. However, as we get to the deeper colors here, maybe we are not drafting Keon Coleman, Darnell Mooney, Marvin Mims Jr., Rashid Shaheed high enough. Of that bunch, I've definitely been high enough on Darnell Mooney, who also had another an injury today, so hopefully that's nothing significant. But Keon Coleman, Marvin Mims, Rashid Shaheed are guys who I could probably push up my rankings a little bit when I go back to work on them. Keon Coleman, inconsistent with an average ceiling. Darnell Mooney, just the opposite, average consistency within a below average ceiling. And then both Marvin Mims, Rashid Shaheed, it makes sense. Inconsistent, but that ceiling is there in times of need. Hopefully they come through for you those weeks. So bring us on to this next group, and somebody who is completely off my board where he's been going at ADP. I have him significantly lower in my rankings is Deebo Samuel. As you can see, the floor for him, we're getting into worse and worse territory here. Is the floor for him betting odds-wise, yards-wise, not good. The ceiling, though. So I just call this touchdown reliant because the floor is not good enough, and I have also Tyler Lockett. I mean, same betting odds, touchdown reliant. But look at the difference of where you can draft these two. Pick 85 or pick 265 for Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett, another guy who I do have higher in my rankings. Same with Xavier Legette, actually, and Quentin Johnson, somebody who I'm comfortable enough with, not one of my primary targets or anything, but I do understand the potential there. He actually has the best touchdown odds and the worst yardage total odds there from Vegas. But Tyler Lockett, going to be another guy, a little touchdown reliant in terms of him actually giving you a good fantasy day, but at least, he's for where you can get him in the draft. he might be fine. And that's going to bring us on to this next group: Jaden Higgins, Christian Kirk, Rashad Bateman, Romeo Doubs. Now, what I will point out here, and should have maybe even pointed out about other guys like Tetairoa McMillan, the only thing is the difference in the ADP of them, and why this is, part of why I like Jaden Higgins more than I like Tetairoa McMillan in terms of actually getting them on my roster, is that when you're drafting rookie wide receivers, you're not drafting them for the first half of the season. You're drafting them for the second half of the season. You hopefully don't need to, and you shouldn't expect to be able to really play them, let's just say weeks 1 through 6, to be safe. You want that second half breakout from them is really what you're getting them for. In terms of the profile here, a floor play is the expectation for Higgins. The touchdown upside, not so high here. And I get it enough, a little bit surprised, but once again, we just want that condensed down to the later half of the season and we'll be good. But there is, of course, other competition in Houston, and I do see some risks with Jaden Higgins. He is somebody who I take highly. Maybe I need to get a little less bold on that. And then that's going to bring us on to Romeo Doubs here, seen as a bit of a view. He's a touchdown-reliant guy, not my, I would prefer the Jaden Higgins of the world, as would the average drafter. But this makes sense for the number 3 receiver on an offense that we anticipate to be pretty good, be able to score enough points and everything, but still yardage totals inconsistent completely game in and game out, and you're just hoping for that touchdown, hopefully, on a long catch and a couple of other catches to add on to that, is really what you're expecting and starting to expect from these guys. Then we go on to this next tier, starting to get towards the poor territory in terms of drafting, and we have some names that we're definitely, not extremely low on. Josh Downs, Emeka Egbuka, Michael Pittman, all with yellow flags here according to Vegas with how highly we're drafting. Vegas has them in the same tier as Trey Harris, Luther Burden, Adam Thielen, somebody who I'm higher on, and, is on the borderline of being a value. Alec Pierce, Dontavian Wicks. I get the Alec Pierce. I'm a little bit concerned for Alec Pierce in terms of the quarterbacks, which one of them's actually playing, and also A.D. Mitchell, I think, still could come out and become the guy instead of him in 3 wide receiver sets, more often at least. Alec Pierce still going to have a role in that offense. But when it comes to here, Josh Downs, Emeka Egbuka, not Michael Pittman, but Emeka Egbuka, Josh Downs, definitely guys who I am lower on. I think I'm right on par with Michael Pittman. Then ADP, so I guess good for me seeing this. But yeah, Josh Downs, there is some concern about the addition, I think mostly of the tight end there. Work in the same area of the field, probably limiting his targets, thus his yardage totals, and also some of his touchdown potential maybe being eked away there throughout the year. And so he just doesn't strike me as a guy fantasy-wise who I love, despite the fact that I really like him, the talent, and what he can do to help a team. He's a fantastic football player. Emeka Egbuka also, it's also a weird case for Emeka Egbuka when you talk about the second half year breakout, because you almost need him to be good in the beginning of the year when Chris Godwin probably misses some time at this point in the time. It seems like that. And that's when Emeka Egbuka is going to get his chance. Now, that does open the door for Emeka Egbuka to improve, and that does give him an opportunity to get onto the field more and probably at his best position more often in the slot. What happens with that when Chris Godwin gets back, I don't think that we know for sure. So there's, like I've said before, a lot of roadblocks to Emeka Egbuka's success, because once you get into the breakout time, that's when Chris Godwin comes back. And then you think of the other weapons outside of Mike Evans. They also have Jalen McMillan, who's also got some betting odds as well. So he's expected to get some sort of usage. And you think of, once again, those other weapons, the tight end, Cade Otton, the running backs, both of them good receiving backs. And that ball gets spread around a fair bit. And it's going to continue to get spread around even more probably with the addition of Emeka Egbuka into this offense. So I just struggle to see how he hits his ceiling too often. And this is an offense too. His touchdown totals aren't great, but the touchdown totals for Tampa Bay their offense are pretty high. So, Vegas not completely buying in, I suppose. And then a couple of guys, Alec Pierce, Dontavian Wicks, potential values. I would call Alec Pierce a boom play. I think we know that. And Dontavian Wicks, complete dart throw, because as you can see right here by the Vegas odds for those yards, he's probably the fourth man in this receiving room. Another ball that gets spread around a fair bit on a lower target total as well. A team that likes to run first. It's a total dart throw, but of course, injury or something like that could also help boost his stock at some point throughout the season. And then we get into DeAndre Hopkins. Red flag here, despite his ADP. He's I don't know why I red flagged it. I probably could have kept that yellow, but he is someone who the yardage totals not even there. I'm not 100% sure why there wasn't any betting odds on his yardage totals, but nonetheless, not there. So we call that no floor, kind of dart throw odd, player here. You need the touchdown. So you hope to ride a hot hand or something if you're ever using them throughout the season. Tough to draft them too highly. And then Demario Douglas, Darius Slayton. Demario Douglas, maybe I might have to move him down a little bit in my rankings. It's not like I'm obscenely high on him. We'll see. Darius Slayton, somebody who I do think that I have properly ranked. By the way, I shouldn't have said it like that. I mean, these guys are considered values, so I don't know if I'm actually too high on Demario Douglas. I am higher on him than ADP for sure. And same with Darius Slayton. Both of them, though, are going to be risky plays by the sounds of it, according to Vegas. And then the final tier that we're really going to look at before we look at a couple of player situations that didn't make it in here or are out of it here for no betting odds. Jalen McMillan, Cedric Tillman, the last two yellow flags for how highly we're drafting them. No floor dart throw here for Jalen McMillan. Once again, makes sense given that situation. And for Cedric Tillman, inconsistent, no ceiling, which also makes sense given that situation in Cleveland. So that does bring us on to the final grouping here. Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, good God, Marquise Brown. No betting odds for them, I assume, because of the unsurety of the situation there, that they have just temporarily been pulled completely. They don't want you betting on it until there's some more understanding of Rashee Rice's punishment may be. And Ricky Pearsall, because he's been injured and everything, I think that they probably pulled his odds. But he just came back. I think he had his first day of practice today. So, Ricky Pearsall could be somebody who will, especially if Juwan Jennings' injury is serious, who will be rising. And then you look at the final two here. Jack Besh, somebody who I've been high on, did not have any betting odds. I was surprised to see that, of course. And I do wonder, does that have something to do with the recent news? I didn't get into this looking at these prior to, of him running with the second team. Did his odds get pulled or whatnot? So Vegas unsure of Jack Besh at this point in time. Somebody I like. Maybe I need to cool off of that a little bit. Kyle Williams, I know some people like him. I think you got to hold your horses with that, but there is an opportunity there for sure. So that is it for the wide receivers. Let's get on to the quarterbacks a little bit quicker with them. All right, once again, I've got this in tiers. So what we looked at for the quarterbacks is going to be the passing yards, odds of 4,500 plus yards, the passing touchdowns, odds of 30-plus passing touchdowns, and the rushing yards for the over-unders that I was able to get. I assume that there are some for other players. I will point out for Bo Nix, I knew he needed something. I couldn't find his, so I just matched up with Drake May because it was roughly this last year. It kind of anticipated to go up from last year, but at the same time, maybe it doesn't. I mean, he did have some higher rushing totals earlier on in the season while he was getting comfortable. So I felt like that was probably a pretty appropriate line or over-under there for Bo Nix to match up with Drake Mays. They're similar enough in that sense. Look at the top tier, nothing too surprising. I will say, Joe Burrow, sometimes he falls a little bit more than some of these other guys here. I feel like he's maybe 5th, 6th off of the board. So Joe Burrow, someone who it does surprise me where he goes. I think he could go a little bit higher, and that's where I do find myself sometimes taking him in mock drafts because he has very, very high upside. In terms of the points, once again, this is on a 7-point scale, and of course the intensity of the coloring determined that. So, Lamar Jackson, Vegas agrees he should be your QB1. Clearly, Jaden Daniels not too far behind, a little bit more rocky maybe in some ways of how he will get there, but those rushing yards are very, very valuable. And then that brings us on to this second tier, which Vegas is suggesting that maybe Josh Allen isn't quite maybe he's going a little bit too high. Maybe he should be going behind Jaden Daniels or Joe Burrow. But what I will say, the one thing we don't have on here is rushing touchdowns. Not that Jaden Daniels can't get rushing touchdowns, or Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, not something you necessarily expect from him so much. But for Josh Allen, I do think that, yes, this rushing yardage totals down, but he is so effective around the goal line. That has been a very consistent threat that he brings, and those rushing touchdowns are quite valuable, especially in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues. So I do think that helps to push him back up into like Joe Burrow territory at least here. But nonetheless, interesting from Vegas and how this point total worked out. So I have very good, still nothing to be really concerned about. Then Vegas is pretty much saying, yeah, you're fine at least where we're taking amongst other quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield, and somebody who I've been talking about quite a bit lately after originally being concerned and low on him in this Dallas offense in general, passing attack I should say in general early. I have totally flipped the gun on that one. Is that a saying, flip the gun? I don't think so. But Dak Prescott going significantly lower in the same tier as Josh Allen, based on how I did the tiers, but different, in the same tier as Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield there. High floor guy. One of the better betting odds for passing yards totals. Now, this passing touchdown's got a little bit funky for whatever reason, despite the fact that this is a little bit reddish in hue. This is still a good above average passing touchdown total betting odd as well. That's going to bring us on to this next tier. We've got Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, and Caleb Williams. Jared Goff right at the top of it here, and maybe even a value for where you can get him. High floor guy as well. I do have my concerns about regression in general there, but the one part that gives me confidence continuously in that offense is the fact that Jared Goff is the constant there, and I think raises the floor in general regardless of changes, offensive line, losses, but those I do think will have an impact on the offense. And then Jalen Hurts, somebody who maybe we're drafting a little bit too high as well. Yellow flag on Jalen Hurts. He is somebody who I don't find myself wanting to draft. I do have him in that top 5 as well. I do have Joe Burrow above him. Just not the most prolific passing attack, so that floor, it's above average, but I don't want an above-average floor when I'm drafting somebody that high in the draft, especially when I can get some of these other guys there. Above average is not good enough, and then you look at the passing touchdown totals, too, for Jalen Hurts, and that's not incredibly good here. Above average ceiling, but you want better than that for where you're taking them. Of course, you do get those rushing yards, but once again, they're not as prolific as some of the other rushing yard totals, and that's why you see this point total being a little bit lower here. Yeah, I don't disagree with Vegas on that. Brock Purdy, maybe a little bit of a value. Somebody who I'm definitely not low on. I do like him more than Caleb Williams in terms of comfort level. The more and more wide receivers keep going down, the harder it takes to actually draft him, but he's a good quarterback. It's a really good system for him. It all works nicely. Vegas is still pretty confident in that, so I'm not going to be overly concerned, but Vegas, a little bit maybe concerned compared to some others in terms of that touchdown total. High floor, average ceiling for Brock Purdy, which is what he's been throughout his career. That brings us on to this next tier here. We're at the average group. Bo Nix, Kyler Murray, Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, Matt Stafford, and Trevor Lawrence. So Bo Nix, Kyler Murray actually having yellow flags here. Are we drafting them a little bit too high? I definitely don't find myself drafting them where they go in the draft, because at that point, it's like, well, I could get Dak Prescott a little later. I Jared Goff, Brock Purdy. There's just so many more names behind them that I view relatively similar to them and recognize that could perform better than them in fantasy. So, above average players, but don't go drafting them too high, and maybe we are currently taking them a little too high when you think that Jordan Love, C.J. Stroud, Matt Stafford, even Trevor Lawrence going so much later. Maybe you don't like all those names, but, are you really that much more confident in Bo Nix or Kyler Murray than you are in any of those names? I don't think you should be, but via ADP, we say we are. Matt Stafford can be the one who stands out here, as well as I feel like Matt Stafford's the one with the darkest coloring there, although when you look at the average ADP, I probably could have highlighted Trevor Lawrence, which would also match my my draft rankings on those two. I am a little bit higher on Stafford and Trevor Lawrence generally. Above average floor, average ceiling for Stafford, and similarly but less so for Trevor Lawrence, who's going ahead of Stafford. Of course, once again, Matt Stafford currently with that back injury. Definitely not somebody I'm targeting if my draft is today. I'd feel much more comfortable with some better news before the season, although, yeah, I don't know. I mean, the reporting around him, it's not super comfortable. I will say that. So keeping an eye on that. If we don't get any clear answers prior to draft day, I'm lowering Rams in general on my board, or just kind of avoiding them if they're going at their ADP in my drafts. But next up, we got J.J. McCarthy. Hey, Vegas says go right on ahead with where you're drafting him. Vegas also says that Tua Tagovailoa maybe could be drafted a little bit higher, saying that he's quite average. You should not be too afraid to use Tua. So I don't disagree with that. I don't target him, but I definitely understand it. And Justin Herbert might actually be going a little too high. This is someone who I am a little bit high on, so you see he's only got 7 points. The other two have 8. That's why he's below them. Some concern there. I do have pretty good confidence. I think this offense is going to click pretty nicely and be pretty good, but Vegas is not so confident in that. So he's got a floor and a below average ceiling. Then we go on to this next tier. We're going to find one of the bigger fades here, I think, in Justin Fields, somebody who I did push down my rankings because this actually makes so much sense the more you think about it. Are we over giving him too much credit for the rushing yard totals when, he's only a little ways above some of these other guys, and he doesn't reach the heights of some of these other guys as well, kind of the one in-betweener, but similar enough to Kyler Murray, but I would say not as good of a passer as Kyler Murray, just as Vegas would say so. Didn't have any touchdown total odds for 30-plus touchdowns, so Vegas definitely not anticipating him to do well in that category. And passing yard totals here, quite low as well there, the lowest of the bunch. So just not anticipating this to be a good passing offense. And yeah, what you end up with is a guy who just has a rushing floor but really doesn't have any kind of realistic ceiling. Like, his ceiling is just low. It's not good because he's not going to have a whole lot of yards. Like, maybe he has two great weeks, because he has those rushing touchdowns, of course, are another thing, too, to remember. I mean, I still have him higher than some of these other guys and above this group, but where we're drafting him, I tend to, I got convinced here, I think a little too high. Drake May, rushing floor guy as well. The yardage total, a little bit better. The touchdown expectations, actually a little bit better. The rushing yard total's a little bit lower. Also, New England offense, lot to prove, touchdown upside and everything. He's similar to Justin Fields in that sense, just maybe gets to the similar fantasy point totals each week a little bit differently, so your specific scoring format, 6 point per passing touchdown. Well, Drake May for sure over Justin, I shouldn't say for sure. Maybe you take Drake May over Justin Fields if they're actually close on your board. but otherwise you would take Justin Fields in other scoring formats potentially. Yeah, that's otherwise, Michael Penix, Cam Ward, Bryce Young, Vegas not buying in on those, which I'm fine with because I'm not either. And even more so, no betting odds for Anthony Richardson, Shedeur Sanders, Russell Wilson, no betting. I guess they're expecting him to maybe be replaced at some point in the season, but that's it for this video. I hope you liked the information. Hope you got some good insights on what Vegas is doing. I do plan on having a running backs video as well for this, and I will slip in the tight ends as well in that one, just briefly. So appreciate you very much. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next one.